Protesters standing atop police vehicles, hurling bricks at cops. Violence, arson, sloganeering, fire, smoke, rampaging and rioting. Mayhem on the streets of United Kingdom. But the UK is not alone. Anti-immigrant sentiment is on the rise in Europe and America. Hello and welcome to Connecting the Dots. I'm Munmun Bhattacharya. Let's connect the dots of an anti-immigrant revolt in the West. For starters, Britain's new centre-left Prime Minister Keir Starmer's priority is to restore public order.
Over 400 people now have been arrested, 100 have been charged, some in relation to online activity.
His office has had a spat with Elon Musk too, because Musk warned a civil war is coming. Starmer's office took exception and asked social media companies to do more to control the violence. What triggered the disorder in the UK was stabbings of 3 children in a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in Southport. The assailant, 17-year-old Axel Rubacabana, was born to Rwandan parents in Cardiff. Disinformation that he was a Muslim immigrant who had arrived in the UK by boat last year fueled the violence. Anger against immigrants and Muslims in particular spilled onto the streets. There were bloody clashes between anti-immigrant protesters and anti-racism protesters. The police waded in to restore order and was caught in the melee. Fact is, this is not a one-country problem. There are clear signs that immigrants are increasingly unwelcome in Western countries. Here's why. Over half of Americans favor deporting those living illegally in the United States back to their home country. That number was only 1/3 in 2016. So opposition to illegal immigration has gone up in the US. It's a similar trend in Australia. Just 10% Australians want more immigration, a sharp fall from a few years ago. Anthony Albanese, its centre-left Prime Minister, says his country's migration system wasn't working properly and he wants to cut migration by half. Even before the Southport incident, Starmer said he wanted the UK to depend less on migration by training more UK workers. By the way, Starmer has confirmed that the Rwanda asylum plan, under which illegal asylum seekers were to be sent to Rwanda, is dead. But Donald Trump has promised mass deportations of undocumented immigrants if he wins the US presidential election. Western countries are against illegal immigration, but they're also increasingly against immigration in general. It is not just words. Australia, Britain and Canada are cracking down on degree mill universities. These offer courses that allow in people whose true intention is to work. Canada hopes to cut the number of study permits by 1/3 this year. Some other countries are making it harder for immigrants to bring their families with them. President Joe Biden has announced measures to bar those who illegally cross America's southern border from getting asylum. In France, President Macron wants to speed up deportations. Germany is going that way too. And if Trump were to win and succeed in his mass deportation plan, then 11 million people could be removed from the US. Do you know in the past 3 years alone, 15 million people have moved to the West? That's the biggest surge in modern history. If we break these numbers down country-wise, we find that in 2023, more than 3 million people immigrated to America on average, 1.3 million to Canada, and about 700,000 to Britain. People came in from all over. There were Ukrainians escaping the war zone. Many came from India, many from sub-Saharan Africa. But the tide is reversing now. The inflow of immigrants to the West is declining. Canada and New Zealand are some examples. The flood of refugees from Ukraine has slowed to a trickle. After the EU passed an order to return third country nationals to their home countries, their departures doubled in the last 2 years. Enforced returns by Britain rose 50% in the first quarter of 2024 compared to last year. Illegal crossings from America's southern border have fallen to a 3-year low. So there is a clear trend line here, an upsurge in immigration followed by a decline. And moderate politicians want to limit the numbers of immigrants, but the not-so-moderate ones favor mass deportations. So what's driving this anti-immigration backlash? Economic anxiety because of a fear of competing for jobs and strain on public services. Concerns about immigration could impact national culture and values, and security fears around terrorism, crime and border control. Remember the 2015 European migrant crisis, when over 1 million immigrants reached Europe by sea in an unauthorized way from war-torn Syria and other countries. This had sparked a sharp rise in anti-immigration attitudes. So what could anti-immigrant measures, especially mass deportations, mean for Western economies? History shows they can be damaging. In the 1930s, when Canada ramped up deportations during the Great Depression, it came at a huge fiscal cost and clogged the ports. In 1972, Ugandan government expelled thousands of people of Asian descent whom it accused of profiteering. A confidential CIA memo that year had this to say: there were virtually no African entrepreneurs left to take over the commerce, and it had become impossible to get a haircut in Kampala as all barbers had shut. There is little doubt that Trump's proposal would cause economic upheavals, as entire industries will need to find new staff. And with 11 million people deported, American GDP would fall 2.6% cumulatively over 3 years. That comes to a $5 trillion GDP decline. Also, undocumented immigrants have been supporting the US economy. They pay billions in social security and taxes. They work as care workers, gardeners, etc. They work in agriculture, meat supply chains and restaurant industry, to name a few. And millions were on the forefront of the COVID-19 pandemic response. A crackdown could mean re-emergence of labor shortages that rich economies grappled with in 2021 and 2022, besides a slowdown in GDP growth. Immigration in the long term could also mean more specialization in the labor force, so an anti-immigrant stance could mean fewer specialists. Countries need to take a hard look at whether they can survive a no-immigration approach. Because over time, advanced economies with aging populations will need more workers who are young and keen to work. So cracking down on arrivals can buy politicians support at home in the short term, but may lack economic logic. While no country welcomes illegal immigrants, on legal immigration the answer lies in nuanced policies, inclusive dialogue, and recognizing the benefits of immigration. Consider this: Indian origin CEOs lead 16 Fortune 500 companies. They collectively employ 2.7 million Americans and generate almost $1 trillion in revenue. So immigrants contribute to economic growth and cultural diversity in host countries. But at the same time, immigrants must respect the rule of law and cultures of host countries. A constructive debate to reach common ground could be the best start to building more harmonious and prosperous communities. For centuries, vultures ruled the skies of India. In fact, they are even revered in Hindu mythology. Remember Jatayu from the Ramayana, the legendary vulture who tried to rescue goddess Sita from Ravan? But the present times tell a different story. There was a time when vultures were a common sight in India. You could easily spot them circling over landfills, searching for dead animals. Sometimes they would even get too close to airports and cause problems for planes taking off. But around 2 decades ago, something changed. India's vulture population started declining rapidly. By the mid-1990s, the number of vultures had dropped from 50 million to almost zero. Reason? Diclofenac, a painkiller for livestock. And these veterinary painkillers turned out to be fatal for vultures. Birds that fed on carcasses of livestock treated with the drug suffered from kidney failure and died. In 2006, the government of India banned the veterinary use of diclofenac. Even in 2023, the Indian government imposed a ban on the use, sale and manufacture of veterinary drugs, ketroprofen and aceclofenac. These drugs also proved detrimental for the Indian vultures. These moves may have slowed the decline of the vulture population to some extent. 3 vulture species have been hit the hardest: the white-rumped vulture, Indian vulture and red-headed vulture. Their numbers have dropped by 98%, 95% and 91% respectively. What's even more alarming is that the decline of Indian vultures has led to thousands of human deaths. But how? Indian vultures are scavengers feeding mainly on the carcasses of dead animals, which are hundreds of millions in number. So in this way, they play a critical role in the ecosystem by disposing of dead animals. But with fewer vultures, dead animals are left to rot, causing a sanitation crisis and potentially spreading diseases and contaminating water sources. See this report. A latest study says the dissemination of these heavy scavenging birds allowed deadly bacteria and infections to proliferate, leading to the deaths of about 500,000 people over 5 years. The study compared districts with and without vultures before and after the introduction of veterinary diclofenac in 1994. The results were alarming. Death rates rose by over 4% in areas where vultures once thrived. But that's not all. The study also found a stray dog connection with the dwindling vulture population. What is it? With vultures gone, stray dogs multiplied, leading to more rabies cases. Unlike vultures, dogs can't clean up rotting carcasses effectively, allowing bacteria to spread into water sources and harm humans. Vultures play a crucial role in maintaining public health, but their importance is often overlooked. In India, there are over 500 million livestock animals, the highest number in the world. Historically, farmers relied on vultures to quickly dispose of dead animals. However, vulture numbers in India are declining at an alarming rate, faster than any other bird species. Today, most vultures in India are found in protected areas where they mainly feed on dead wildlife rather than livestock. Despite this, experts warn that veterinary drugs still pose a significant threat to vultures. The problem is made worse by the decreasing availability of carcasses due to increased burial and competition from feral dogs. Additionally, quarrying and mining activities can disrupt vulture habitats and nesting sites. The big question now is, will the vultures make a comeback? It's hard to predict, but there are some encouraging signs. For example, last year, 20 vultures that were bred in captivity and tracked with satellite tags were released into the wild in West Bengal. And in a recent survey, over 300 vultures were spotted in southern India. Vultures are silent sentinels of the skies. The question is, will India's skies soar again with their wings? That's all in this edition of Connecting the Dots. We'll see you next week with more raging issues. Until then, it's a goodbye from all of us in the Delhi newsroom. This is Munmun Bhattacharya signing off. Take care and stay safe.